My ex-wife and my stepbrother were together. He grinned when he saw me until I said, "I just sent the footage." It was the sound of the refrigerator that made me realize how long I'd been sitting there. Not the clock ticking, not the dull ache in my back from the kitchen chair that should have been replaced 3 years ago. Just that low hum, that almost human sigh of the fridge cycling again. It reminded me of her for some reason, maybe because she used to say it sounded like the thing was grieving, like the whole apartment was holding its breath. I don't know why I remembered that then. The plate in front of me was still half full. Scrambled eggs, cold now, curled at the edges. I hadn't eaten. I wasn't hungry. I didn't even remember making them, but the pan was in the sink, soaking in soapy water that had gone cold and cloudy. Outside, the rain was painting streaks down the window, soft and steady, like it didn't care if I noticed or not. Gray light filtered through the blinds. The apartment looked washed out, like someone had drained all the color while I slept, or maybe it was always like this and I just never saw it. It had been 5 months since she left. Or rather, since we signed the papers and she moved out and we did that strange little dance of pretending we were both fine with the unraveling, that it was mutual, that it was adult, that we'd grown apart, as if love was a sweater that shrunk in the wash. In truth, she left long before the boxes were packed. I felt it in the way she'd touch her phone more than my hand, in how her eyes would glaze over when I spoke like she was listening to a podcast in her head. She stopped laughing at my jokes, not because they weren't funny, but because I think she started hearing them as cries for attention. And maybe they were. I don't even remember the last time we kissed like we meant it. That haunts me more than the fights, more than the silence. The not knowing when the last real moment was, like stepping into an elevator after the cables have already snapped. The worst part wasn't losing her, it was losing the idea of us. The long-term version I'd built in my head. The years we hadn't had yet, the Sunday mornings with the newspaper, the fights about the thermostat, the aging side by side in a slow, quiet companionship. I thought we were working toward that. She apparently had other plans. What I didn't expect, what I couldn't have expected, was who she had those plans with. I should have noticed. That's what I keep coming back to. The signs, the little clues left like breadcrumbs that I was too busy or too naive to follow. My stepbrother Danny, he was always around, always popping in, always with that easy bullshit charm of his. The kind that makes you forget he once borrowed your car and returned it with a dent and a lie. He was good at that, twisting truth just enough so you questioned yourself, so you felt silly for even asking. We didn't grow up together. He came into my life when I was 16, when our parents remarried. We never got close, but we had this thing, a rivalry that never became a relationship. He was the golden boy, the spontaneous one, the one who got away with everything, and I was the one who paid for it. Still, he was family, and when things were bad with her and I couldn't talk to my friends without feeling judged, I let him in, let him hang around, let him comfort her when I couldn't, when I was working late, when I was sulking on the balcony with my headphones on, trying to disappear. And she let him. That's what kills me. She let him. I found out by accident. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't trying to catch anyone. I was just scrubbing through footage on my laptop. I'd set up a small security camera in the guest room after a break-in a few months back. It was low-tech, nothing fancy. I'd forgotten it was even recording. The footage should have been boring, an empty room, shadows moving with the trees outside, dust caught in shafts of light. But then there was movement, people. Them. At first I didn't recognize her. The angle was off, but I knew her laugh, that sharp inhale before the giggle, the way she covered her mouth when she thought she was being too loud. And him, he was leaning against the desk, casual, like he lived there, like he belonged. His hand found her hip without hesitation. She didn't stop him. She leaned in. I froze. There wasn't anything explicit, not yet, but the intimacy was worse. The familiarity, the fact that this wasn't the first time. I paused the footage, rewound it, watched it again, like maybe if I looked hard enough it would be different, like maybe I misunderstood. But I didn't. She was smiling in a way she hadn't smiled with me in months, and he looked at her like he was proud, like he'd won something. And then right before she pulled him closer, he looked straight at the camera, dead on, that same smirk he wore in every school photo, like he knew, like he wanted me to see. I dropped the phone, literally dropped it. It hit the hardwood with a hollow slap. I just stood there, staring at the screen where the video had paused, their blurry forms frozen in digital betrayal. I didn't cry, not at first. It was like all the feelings were on delay. I just felt empty. My chest was a sinkhole. I walked into the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror, expecting something to be different. A mark. A sign, but no, I looked the same, like the version of me that still didn't know. I sent the footage to my laptop, trimmed the beginning and end like I was editing a scene from a short film. My hands were steady. My breath was slow, but inside me something was collapsing. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the floor of the living room with a bottle of something I'd been saving for a good night and drank it until the label blurred. I thought about everything we'd been through, good and bad, and how none of it mattered now. How it could all be undone by a look, a touch, a lie told with a smile. 3 days later, I went to the family barbecue. It was one of those forced reunions our parents insisted on, everyone pretending we still functioned as a unit. Burgers on the grill, children screaming in the yard, the illusion of togetherness. He saw me across the lawn, raised his beer, that grin. I walked up to him, stood close enough to smell his cologne, the same one he always wore, the one I used to borrow in high school when I wanted to feel like I mattered. He opened his mouth to say something, and I beat him to it. I just sent the footage. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't need to. His face changed. The color drained, the smirk evaporated. And for the first time in my life, Danny looked small to me. I turned and walked away, plate untouched, heart hammering, and something in me finally snapped, quietly, like a rope under pressure. I didn't look back, I didn't pack anything, not really. Just some clothes shoved into a duffel, my laptop, the old notebook I'd written our wedding vows in, don't ask me why I took that, and a half-dead plant I forgot to water but couldn't throw away. I didn't even lock the door behind me, just walked out. The highway was empty in that strange liminal way that makes you feel like you've stepped out of time. No music, just the hum of tires and the dull ache behind my eyes that had taken root somewhere around the third or fourth replay of the video. I could still see their faces, still hear that low, conspiratorial laugh of hers, his laugh, too, all breathy and stupid and intimate like a shared cigarette. I remember thinking, God, how long had it been going on? Had they whispered about me after I left the room? Made jokes in their little private language. Was it just sex, or was it worse than that? Emotional, soft, dangerous. My hands shook on the wheel. I didn't cry, not then. I found this cabin on some janky rental site, north of nowhere, just trees and fog and a dirt road that scraped the bottom of my car, no cell reception. The porch light flickered like it wasn't sure it wanted to work. When I stepped inside, the place smelled like wet wood and dust and loneliness. Perfect. There were mice in the attic. I could hear them at night, little clawed feet skittering above me like they were reenacting some tiny domestic tragedy of their own. The walls were thin enough to hear the wind argue with the branches outside, and I swear the shadows here moved when I wasn't looking. Still, it was quiet, a kind of dead quiet that didn't ask me anything, and that felt like grace. The first few nights I didn't sleep, just lay on the musty mattress, staring at the beams in the ceiling and replaying every conversation I'd ever had with her. I interrogated every memory, every smile, every time she said, I love you, and I believed her. I turned it all over like old receipts, looking for proof I'd missed something. I wanted there to be a moment I could point to and say, there. That's when she left me, even if her body stayed. But there was just a slow, quiet erosion, like wind on stone, invisible until it was. I started walking. Long walks through the woods behind the cabin, no path, no map, just me and the smell of pine and the sound of branches snapping underfoot. Sometimes I imagined running into a bear. I wasn't suicidal, but there was something darkly appealing about the idea of being eaten alive by something honest. I'd find stumps and sit for hours just breathing, trying to exist without thinking, trying to be instead of remember. One day I found a deer carcass, half picked clean, ribs like white piano keys, scattered leaves stained red. I crouched next to it and stared. The thing had been alive not long ago, and now it was just remains, leftovers, no warning, no ceremony, just done. I felt like that, like something had hollowed me out and left the shell behind. A few days in, I met Fran. She owned the cabin next door, if you could call it that, more like a crooked wooden box with windows. She was in her 60s, maybe older, wiry and sun-leathered, with a voice like gravel and the sharpest green eyes I've ever seen. She knocked on my door one evening, holding a chipped mug and a tea bag. "You look like hell," she said. "Figured you could use something hot." I didn't argue. She stepped inside like she owned the air, boiled water, and made me sit. She didn't ask what I was running from, just poured tea and talked about the land, the storms, the neighbor who tried to put up a Wi-Fi tower and got run out of town. I listened, not because I cared, but because it was easier than listening to myself. That became a thing. I'd go over to her place, she'd pour tea or whiskey depending on her mood, and we'd sit in near silence while the sky went dark around us. One night, she told me about her husband. Said he died 15 years ago, sudden and stupid, heart attack in the bathtub. "But that's not what broke me," she said, staring into her cup like it held the memory. "What broke me was realizing that all the things I hated about him stayed, and all the things I loved went with him." I nodded like I understood. I didn't, not then, but I felt the shape of her pain, the silhouette of it, and I recognized it. "You want to talk about her?" she asked once. "No," I said. "Good," she replied. "Talk, overrated anyway." Some nights I'd think about calling someone, my mother, an old friend, just to hear a voice that knew me before all this. But I couldn't do it. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want their "you'll get through this" or their "everything happens for a reason." I didn't want reasons. I wanted silence. I wanted stillness. I wanted a world where they didn't exist. But they kept invading my thoughts. I'd imagine them in my old apartment, maybe laughing at how I stormed off like some tragic cliché. Maybe whispering that I was always a little too serious, too sensitive. Maybe they told each other they didn't mean to hurt me. Bullshit. He'd always been like this, and she'd made a choice. Whatever loneliness she blamed it on, whatever cracks she pointed to, I'd been there too. But I didn't fuck her sister. I didn't light the house on fire just because it got cold. And yet I still loved her. That was the sickest part. Even in that cabin, even after everything, I still found pieces of me that reached for her in the dark. Like muscle memory. Like betrayal didn't know how to kill devotion. But slowly that ache softened, like a wound going numb. One morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about the video in 2 days. I hadn't replayed it. Hadn't felt the sharp sting behind my ribs when I heard her laugh in my mind. I made coffee, burnt toast, sat on the porch and listened to the wind. The leaves were starting to change, autumn creeping in with its quiet death. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself feel the weight of what happened. I didn't run from it. I sat in it. I let the grief fill the room. And I breathed. It didn't come like a storm, it came like a knock. 3 sharp taps on the old wooden door, just as the kettle was beginning to boil. I knew who it was before I looked. I didn't know how I knew, some subtle shift in the air pressure or the way my heart slammed up into my throat like it recognized a predator. But it was them, or at least it was her. I didn't open the door right away. I stood there, my hand hovering above the handle, palms slick, breath tight in my chest like I'd been holding it for weeks. I half expected her to leave, but she didn't. Another knock, softer this time, like she knew I was on the other side. When I opened the door, she looked smaller. It startled me. She had always seemed so composed, effortlessly curated, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make you feel underdressed without saying a word. But now her hair was tied back with something that looked like desperation. No makeup, hoodie too big for her shoulders, and her eyes bloodshot. She looked like she'd been crying for days. I wondered if that was supposed to mean something to me. We stared at each other for a beat too long. Then she said my name like she was testing it for cracks. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without answering. She walked in slow, like she was waiting to be swallowed by the room. The floor creaked beneath her. She glanced at the empty tea mug, the crumpled blanket on the couch. I watched her trying to assemble a picture of my life now, like she was looking for proof of how bad or how okay I'd become. People do that, pretend they're checking in on you, when really they just want to see how deep the damage goes. "You look," she started. "Don't," I said, sharper than I meant to. She sat anyway. We didn't speak for a long time, just the kettle behind us still rumbling, just the fire of unspoken things filling the space. Finally, she said it. "I didn't plan for it to happen." I laughed like something cracked open inside me. Jesus, is that really the line we're going with? She looked down, hands twisted in her lap. It wasn't like we were plotting it behind your back, it just happened. "It just happened." I repeated the words like they tasted bad. "He's my stepbrother, you were my wife, that's not something that just happens, that's a choice. Over and over again, you don't trip and fall into someone's bed." "It wasn't about him," she said suddenly, eyes sharp, voice trembling. "It was about you. You stopped seeing me. You were always working, always somewhere else. You weren't present. Don't you fucking dare make this about me." I stood too fast. My chair screeched against the floor and I flinched at the sound. She flinched too, looked up at me like I'd just slapped her, but I didn't owe her comfort anymore. I was working because I thought I was building a life for us. I thought that's what we were doing. You don't get to rewrite history just because you're guilty. Tears welled in her eyes, and still it didn't move me the way it used to. Once upon a time, her pain would have undone me, would have broken something open inside me that made me want to hold her, fix it, smooth the world out for her. Now I just felt tired. "Why him?" I asked, not because I didn't already know, but because I needed to hear her say it. She hesitated. And then quietly she said, "Because he looked at me like I was still worth something." My stomach turned. "So I didn't," I said. "I'm not saying it's fair," she whispered. "I'm just saying I was lonely." "You weren't alone," I snapped. "You just chose not to reach for me." That's when she cried, really cried, shoulders shaking, face crumpling in on itself like a paper cup. And I watched, not with cruelty, but with the numbness of someone who's already bled out. Then a new voice, lower, more guarded, from the doorway behind her. "Danny." "Of course." He leaned against the frame like this was some casual check-in, his hair too perfect, his mouth already half-curved into that familiar smirk but faltering now. He looked from me to her and back again, and for a second I swear I saw something like regret on his face, but it passed. "Didn't know you were here too," he said to me, like I was the intruder in my own exile. "You knew exactly where I was," I said. "You've always known how to follow the wreckage." He tried to play calm. "Look, I didn't come to fights." "Then leave." He straightened. "You think this was easy for me?" "No," I said. "I think it was fun for you. Winning, that's what this was about, right? Getting the one thing I had that you didn't." His eyes narrowed. You think too much of yourself. No, I said, almost smiling. That's the difference between us. I never thought enough, not of myself, not of her, not of what I deserved. He stepped into the cabin. I didn't stop him, just watched. I loved her, he said. I did too, I replied. Look how far that got either of us. We stared at each other, two halves of a shattered mirror. We looked so alike in that moment, same tired eyes, same bitter mouth. But I wasn't him. And I never would be. I'm not here to make peace, I said. I don't forgive either of you, not now, maybe not ever. He opened his mouth again, but I cut him off. You know what the worst part is? I asked. It's not the betrayal, it's that I can't even grieve her properly, because every time I miss her, you're there, like rot in the memory, like mold on fruit. He didn't respond. She stood, reached for me like muscle memory. I stepped back. Don't, I said, soft, final. She dropped her hand. And for a moment, none of us said anything. Then I turned away, walked to the back door, opened it. The wind came in sharp and clean. I didn't look at them again. I think we're done here, I said. And I meant it. For the first time, I meant it. They left. I don't remember if they said anything on the way out. Maybe they did. Maybe she whispered my name like it still belonged to her. Maybe he muttered something defensive, something hollow, some weak parting shot to salvage what was left of his ego. But I didn't hear it. The silence afterward was the loudest thing I'd ever known. It filled the cabin like smoke. It sank into the wood. It sat with me. I didn't move for a long time, just stood by the open door, letting the cold bite my skin. The trees didn't care. The wind didn't care. The sky had already started to darken, that soft blue slipped toward dusk. It smelled like pine needles and wet earth, and somehow that smell felt more like home than any room I'd shared with her. I didn't cry again, not because I wasn't grieving. Grief had just changed shape by then. It had stopped being a scream and started being a weight I'd gotten used to carrying. It had a rhythm now, a texture, something I could hold in my palm and say, yes, this is mine. I spent another week in that cabin, maybe more. I didn't count the days, I just let them happen. I'd wake up early when the light was gray and gentle. I stopped making coffee the way I used to. No sugar, no almond milk, just black, strong, a little bitter, like I wanted it to hurt going down. I started writing again, nothing deep, just small things, lists, memories, fragments of old conversations, things I'd forgotten I remembered. I wrote down the moment I first met her at a bookstore, both of us reaching for the same novel. She smiled, I made a joke about fate, and she laughed like I'd caught her off guard. I also wrote about the last time she touched me without flinching. The way she used to hum when brushing her teeth. The day she called me home in a half-sleep whisper. I didn't write to forgive, I wrote to remember honestly. Not the curated version I clung to during the breakup, not the highlight reel. I wanted all of it. The goods, the cruel, the boring, the sacred. I wanted the truth. Some days I still hated them. But I stopped hating myself. That was the first real shift, the first sign that I might survive this, not just endure it, but actually survive it. I came back to the city with less than I left with. I sold most of what was in the apartment, left the couch on the curb, gave away our wine glasses, packed up her books and dropped them at a donation bin 2 neighborhoods away, like if they were far enough, they couldn't haunt me. I didn't return to the old apartment, too many shadows, too much air that still smelled like her. I found a small studio above a bookstore, quiet, clean, blank. The first night there, I couldn't sleep, not because I was sad, but because I realized I could finally breathe. The bookstore owner's name was Malik, middle-aged, warm, quiet voice like radio jazz. He found out I liked to read and offered me the employee discount even though I didn't work there. He asked what I did. I said, right now, I rebuild. He nodded like that was a perfectly valid profession. I bought a plant not to replace the one that died, but because I wanted to prove I could keep something alive. I went to therapy. Alma, mid-40s, kind but unblinking. She didn't ask me how I felt at first. She asked me what I believed, about love, about loyalty, about myself. That question stayed with me, because I hadn't realized how much I'd let my beliefs about them become my beliefs about me. She said something once that I still think about. They didn't betray you because you're unlovable. They betrayed you because they're unfinished. I nodded like I understood. Weeks passed. The ache didn't vanish, but it softened. Some days I'd wake up and not think of them. Other days I did, but when I thought of them, it didn't twist, it didn't crush, it just was. One night I made pancakes for dinner, not the way she used to, with almond flour and extra blueberries, just plain box mix, sloppy edges. I flipped one too early and it splattered. I laughed, like really laughed. Alone in the kitchen with batter on my shirt, I laughed until I had to sit down. That felt like a kind of freedom I didn't know existed. I stopped checking their socials. I stopped needing to know if they were happy. Let them be, let them build whatever house of mirrors they wanted. I had no place in it. I had mine. It wasn't much: a mattress on the floor, a chipped mug I liked, a stack of notebooks filled with scribbled fragments, but it was mine. And it was quiet. One night I walked by the river, cold wind, stars sharp in the sky. I stood on the bridge for a while, watching the water churn below. I thought about everything I'd lost, everything I'd learned. And then I said it aloud to no one. It still hurts, but it doesn't own me anymore. The wind took it. And I walked home.